Greetings to all conference participants. My name is Richard Rambarran, and I'll be presenting to you this afternoon in my capacity as country manager for NCB Capital Markets Guyana Inc. Gives me great pleasure to be able to speak to you on a very poignant topic within the development framework of Guyana. And at its core, that is, what role does capital markets play in the development trajectory of the country? I think there can be no discussion about the development trajectory of Guyana without adequately including the financial sector, the state of play in the financial sector, and most importantly, what is the state of affairs as it relates to the capital markets and how and where we go. I think it is no small secret, firstly, where Guyana is heading, the type of exponential growth that the Guyanese economy is firstly experiencing currently, and then in the second instance is poised to experience in the medium to long term. We've registered in Guyana double-digit growth since 2020, of course, the pandemic year, and a lot of this is attributed to strong performance in the petroleum sector and the mammoth findings as it relates to petroleum. It's important to note, however, that even in spite of that mammoth finding and what is happening in the oil and gas sector, there is a strong pass-through effect in the economy. And because of increased disposable income, because of rapid expansion in the petroleum sector, and then because of the inbound interest in the country from an investor standpoint, you find that the performance of the non-oil economy is very strong. It is also to the credit of the government of Guyana that we have been placing emphasis too on diversification of the economy and at its core, ensuring that the economy does not become a one-sector type of economy where the focus is solely on oil and gas and such. We suffer the deleterious effects of a drop in the commodity price. What is particularly important, I believe, moving forward for Guyana, it's actually the financial sector. Firstly, in Guyana, I would say that we have a financial sector that is not as sophisticated as perhaps some of our Caribbean sister countries, and one that is not in a position, all things being equal, to fully support the rapid expansion in the real sector of the economy. If you think about the state of play in Guyana, you have 6 deposit-taking financial institutions, 6 commercial banks. You have approximately 7 non-deposit-taking financial institutions. You have a stock exchange in Guyana that trades once weekly, so on Monday. Only 11 companies are listed on the stock exchange, and 5 of those companies are commercial banks, 5 of the 6 commercial banks in Guyana. A probe a little bit further would indicate that commercial banks in Guyana too are limited in their balance sheets relative to the capital requirements of a rapidly emerging economy such as Guyana. Bear in mind that these are institutions that previously catered for an economy that had a growth rate of approximately 3%, 4% on average over the past decade. Now, we have an economy that is rapidly emerging, and the balance sheet for the commercial banks that are the main source of funding in Guyana do not have the sophistication and the level of size to be able to cater for this rapidly emerging economy. I think additionally, when you examine the state of play too, the legislative and regulatory architecture is one that was crafted for a macroeconomic stabilization period post the structural adjustment program in Guyana, which in Guyana is known as the ERP. And the entire architecture was essentially for macroeconomic stabilization and ensuring that the country was on a fiscally sustainable path and one in which there was certainty, and ensuring that regulations created a very macroprudential type of situation. But why is all of this important, and why am I speaking about this as an antecedent to capital markets and capital markets development in Guyana? Well, if you think about it, banks in Guyana, because of a limiting balance sheet, they will reach a limiting factor, if you will, in size, scale, type of lending that they can undertake based on the legislative and regulatory architecture. And let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean. Firstly, a bank in Guyana can provide, they generally provide loans on nothing else other than 100% collateral-backed lending. And what is considered to be a collateral in Guyana? Collateral has to be an immovable asset, such as land, such as property. And that, of course, makes it very difficult for persons who have not accumulated capital over the years and for MSMEs who are attempting to break into the space and participate in the type of catalytic growth that we are seeing in Guyana. Another example is that commercial banks in Guyana, based on their single borrowers limit, even in syndication amongst the commercial banks, can loan approximately 70 to 80 million US dollars at their threshold. This, as you might appreciate, is not sufficient for a rapidly expanding economy. And if you think about it within a project sense, one hotel in Guyana at this juncture can cost about 70 to 80 million US dollars. Now, this is a very important point because there is no full utilization of Guyana's growth potential, local content that has been very topical, of course, in Guyana, or regional benefits without financial sector development, and more specifically and importantly, that of capital markets. Why is that so? Well, if you think about capital markets essentially allow for efficient flow of resources within an economy. They facilitate movement of capital from persons who have capital, accumulated capital, to persons who are desirous of capital. And there will be appropriate pricing of risk, which will then also determine the appetite for specific types of investment. And this, of course, is paramount in ensuring that the hand of the free market guides investment decisions in the country. And so, if one really wants to unleash, in my view, the full power of the free market, the full power of private sector, the full power of Guyana's growth potential, then capital markets ought to be developed in country. Now, where do we go as a country with this? I think one of the very first things that needs to be undertaken in Guyana is a review of the legislative and regulatory architecture of the financial sector. As I would have mentioned in my opening statement, we have the architecture that caters for a particular period of time. Guyana has moved very rapidly from that realization, or from that period being the reality in Guyana, to an economy which is now being recognized globally for its tremendous rates of growth and its exponential rates of growth. I think also what is extraordinarily important is to ensure that there is capital market development through a specific focus by players in the country, all stakeholders, government, private sector, academia, members of civil society, because it is of everyone's interest to ensure that in a Guyana that requires a high amount of capital at this juncture, that no capital is left sitting idle in the country. And I am aware that the government of Guyana, in its 2023 budget, gave a commitment to examine the capital markets in Guyana. And I think that this is an excellent first step in ensuring that we begin to drive development forward. Additionally, but it cannot be as underestimated in its importance, I think that there ought to be greater awareness to the stakeholders in country through education about capital markets, about various product offerings other than senior secured debt that is being offered by the commercial banks in Guyana, the most popular product. I think there also needs to be education as it relates to corporate governance frameworks, and how corporate governance can actually help to ensure that your enterprise is poised for financial support and accelerating your business development. And additionally, I think there ought to be education on what are the benefits from engaging with capital markets? What are the benefits from having equity investment, looking at a variety of working capital products, for example? What are the benefits of ensuring that you poise your company for listing on a stock exchange, going public? What are the benefits from the development of a junior stock exchange in your country? So I think that there ought to be greater awareness around what is happening or what can happen for capital markets. And that, in my view, will bring increased not just awareness through education, but increased demand for products. Because at the moment, I believe that there is a latent demand that exists, but because of the lack of awareness or education on what I would have mentioned earlier, it becomes very difficult for someone to really say what it is that they want when they don't know what it is that they want. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to offer a few words in this regard, and I, of course, look forward to taking questions from you and being able to engage the audience as we have this very pertinent discussion for the development of capital markets in Guyana. Thank you.